Dear brethren, the ideal of the Franciscan spirituality is perfect conformity to the poor crucified Christ. That's where the Franciscan desires to arrive. Perfect conformity to Jesus, in that charity that gives all for Him, in love, and because of that makes itself poor in earthly things so as to possess Him as, the true and supreme good. So if we find the Franciscan call to this conformity to Christ, progressive conformity during his life, all of this has to begin in the same place where Christ's life began, and that is in the Virgin Mary. That's where the Franciscan begins his life, so to speak, and she is always with him as he grows in his conformity to Christ. And we find this perfectly present right in the beginnings of Franciscan spirituality with our Holy Father, St. Francis. And he had not only this as an ideal, but he even had a little church that was identified with this Marian cradle, so to speak, out of which the Franciscan Order was born. And that little church was called St. Mary of the Angels. It's found in the plain just below Assisi, a little church that was in a bad state of repair, and he, inspired by grace, repaired the church and then loved that church as a place where he experienced special graces and a special presence of our Blessed Mother. And then he told his friars to never leave that church. His words were something like, if they kick you out of one door, come back in the other, because this place is, especially loved by God, visited by angels, and a place particularly dear to the Blessed Virgin. So he loved that church, and he himself recognized it, as I already said, as the cradle, the Marian cradle, from which the Franciscan Order had been born through the intercession of Our Lady, through her merits. So here we have a little church, a sign of Our Lady, place where our Holy Father St. Francis wanted his friars to be present, to love, to never leave. But as I already pointed out, that little church, as beautiful as it is, as rich a place of grace as it is, it represents something which is much bigger than itself. It's a sign. It's a sign of Our Lady herself. So when our Holy Father St. Francis told his friars to never leave that place, well, he meant the place in itself, but he also meant the Immaculate Heart of Mary. In other words, he never wanted his friars to leave her. She is the true cradle, so to speak. He wanted his friars to be always close to she who is Queen, Mediatrix, and Mother. This is a deeper sense, so to speak. It's in her that the soul is, born to the life of grace, and with her maternal care is accompanied through all the stages of conformity to Christ, even to the greatest conformity to Him in His passion and death. Our Holy Father St. Francis ardently desired the salvation of souls. And once our Lord appeared to him together with our Blessed Mother, and they said, "Ask us any grace for the good of souls." And so he asked for the grace of that which effectively is a plenary indulgence, which at the time was unheard of. This was actually the first plenary indulgence ever granted. So he asked our Lord for the grace of complete pardon, not only of sin, but even of the temporal punishment due to sin, for all those who would visit this little church of Our Lady of the Angels. And our Lord replied to him, "Francis, you've asked me something pretty big, but I'll grant that to you on condition that the current Pope approve that." See how our Lord always respects, the hierarchy that he himself has put in place. So he wanted the Pope to confirm that. So our Holy Father St. Francis asked that of Honorius III, who was the Pope, the reigning Pope at the time, and the Pope confirmed that. And so Assisi, or its little church of Our Lady of the Angels, became the first place where a plenary indulgence was ever granted. That indulgence is still in place to this day, but it's been extended to all Franciscan churches, and in more recent times, believe it or not, to every parish church. So today it's possible to receive that indulgence. It's the usual requirements. It's called, one of the names of it is the Pardon of Assisi. In some parts of the world it's very, very well known. So today, for example, in Italy, you'll have a lot of people going to their churches for the Pardon of Assisi. Let us thank our Holy Father for this grace that he obtained for us, but above all, worship and praise our Lord for this grace, this special pardon, this special mercy that he grants us through his own merits and through the merits of his Blessed Mother. An indulgence is nothing other than, a cancellation, so to speak, of our debts because of their merits, in which their merits are paying for our debts. So they're not just being cancelled, they're being paid for by the merits of our Lord Jesus Christ and his Holy Mother and those of the saints. So the conditions are the usual ones. So, detachment from sin, being in a state of grace, and that requires, confession if you are not. But if you are, you still need to go to confession, at least within, 8 days. Holy Communion received with the intention of, asking for the grace of the indulgence, some prayers for the Holy Father's intentions, and then the visit to the church. This church can be considered a Franciscan church, and so you can obtain the indulgence here. So let us praise our Lord for these graces, but bearing in mind the love that our Holy Father had, our Holy Father St. Francis had for that church as a sign of Our Lady, of her heart, of her being our refuge, let us truly enter into that refuge. Even though we are far from the little church that's on the plains of Assisi, we are not far from Our Lady, and she is the true refuge, the true place into which we would desire to enter and never leave. Praise be Jesus and Mary.